Legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife were completely surprised inside their own home, the one place that's supposed to feel safe and secure. What happened didn't involve a stranger or a break-in. It involved someone close, someone trusted, and it turned their entire world upside down. Rob spent decades telling stories about love, family, and connection, yet his own life was quietly falling apart behind closed doors. His son, Nick Reiner, had long faced personal problems that were already weighing heavily on the family, but no one imagined how intense things were about to become the night before everything fell apart. That is totally false in every way. Investigators are now looking back at old comments Nick once made about his father, statements that feel creepy looking back. Those remarks suggest the warning signs weren't sudden. They had been there, hanging under the surface long before things spun out of control. The heartbreaking incident involving Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, happened on December 13th, 25. A night that was meant to be happy, warm, and full of holiday spirit. Earlier that evening, the couple went to a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien, surrounded by friends, familiar faces, laughter, and celebration. But beneath the festive lights and music, something felt wrong. Witnesses later told investigators that a heated argument broke out between Rob and Nick, and it instantly pulled attention away from the celebration. This wasn't a quiet disagreement whispered in a corner. It was loud, intense, and impossible to ignore. Voices were raised, tension filled the room, and guests exchanged uncomfortable looks as the argument got worse. Several people later described Nick's behavior as disturbing, saying it stood out in a way that stuck with them long after the party ended. Something about that moment didn't feel right, and one guest later told investigators that Nick had everyone feeling nervous, a phrase that quickly spread as authorities began putting together the hours leading up to what followed. Rob didn't back away or make the situation worse. Instead, he faced it directly, trying to steady things and keep control. Michelle stayed right by his side through it all. The two moved together, calm and united, refusing to let the moment explode in public. When they eventually left the party, it didn't look dramatic or rushed. It felt deliberate, like parents choosing to handle something privately rather than let it play out in front of everyone. To those watching, it looked like two parents trying to protect their family and get back control of a situation that was slipping fast. Later that same night, Rob had a phone call with Eric Idle, and the tone was completely different. According to Eric, the conversation was light, positive, and focused on future creative plans, especially the long-awaited Spinal Tap sequel. There was no hint of panic, stress, or fear in Rob's voice. He sounded motivated, hopeful, and fully focused on what was coming next. But in quieter moments before that night, Rob had shared something deeply worrying with a few close friends. He admitted he was scared of his own son. This wasn't said in anger or frustration. It came from real fear, from a parent who felt helpless watching behavior he couldn't control. That private worry would soon take on a much heavier meaning once they returned home later that night. In the early hours of December 14th, something devastating happened inside the Reiner home in Brentwood. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office later confirmed the incident occurred before sunrise, though the exact moment couldn't be precisely determined. By around 3:00 p.m., concern turned into alarm. Their daughter, Romy Reiner, who lived across the E Street, went to check on them. After repeated attempts to reach them, failed. The moment she entered the house, she knew something was very wrong and immediately called for help. Paramedics and LAPD officers rushed to the scene, and both Rob and Michelle were found unconscious. Authorities quickly secured the home and launched a full-scale investigation, treating the situation as a serious domestic case from the very start. One detail immediately changed everything. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. Doors and windows were intact, untouched, and undisturbed. That pointed to one chilling conclusion. Whoever was responsible didn't break in. They were already inside or welcomed in willingly. Neighbors were questioned, but no one reported hearing anything unusual that night. No alarms, no shouting, no chaos. In a quiet Brentwood neighborhood where sound travels easily, that silence felt disturbing in itself. Investigators noted that whoever moved through the home did so quietly and on purpose. There was no mess, no struggle visible, just controlled movement, the kind only someone familiar with the space could manage. As detectives put together the timeline, attention quickly turned to Nick Reiner. According to police records, Nick left the house shortly after the incident and arrived at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica around 4:00 a.m. on December 14th. Hotel staff later told officers his behavior appeared completely normal. He checked in calmly, spoke clearly, and showed no visible signs of distress. No panic, no shaking, no confusion. However, after Nick checked out, investigators searched the hotel room and reportedly found evidence that directly connected him to what had occurred at the Brentwood home. That single discovery placed him squarely inside the investigation's critical timeline. His stay at the hotel was brief. Within hours, he was gone again, moving fast, like someone who didn't want to stay in one place too long. Late. That day, surveillance footage captured Nick at a gas station near Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue. Cameras showed him walking in casually, grabbing a drink, paying, and leaving without hesitation. He didn't appear rushed or nervous. Everything about his manner seemed calm, controlled, and ordinary. That calm stood in sharp contrast to what investigators believed had already taken place. By around 9:15 p.m. on December 14th, police had located him near Exposition Park, just steps from the University of Southern California campus. Patrol cars surrounded the area in a tense but controlled operation, happening right in front of bystanders. Nick didn't resist. He didn't run. He stayed quiet and followed every instruction officers gave him. Within minutes, Nick was taken into custody without resistance. No struggle, no dramatic scene, just silence and handcuffs snapping shut. By the end of that night, investigators were no longer guessing. They were connecting dots that painted a disturbing pattern across Los Angeles. A heated argument, an eerily silent home, no signs of forced entry, a quick disappearance, and a strange trail that stretched from Brentwood to Santa Monica and beyond. Still, one question refused to fade. What actually happened inside that house? That's when the case shifted into a darker, more complex phase. Once the Brentwood home was secured, forensic teams stepped in, methodical and relentless, determined to uncover what witnesses and neighbors couldn't explain. Every room, every surface, every detail was examined with precision. Next came the most critical task, locking down the timeline. With no cameras inside the house and no clear timestamps, investigators had only science to rely on. Temperature readings, physical indicators, microscopic traces. Nothing was overlooked. One chilling question guided every step. When did Rob and Michelle Reiner lose their lives? And how did it truly unfold? To answer that, investigators focused on physical markers left behind. Muscle stiffening and blood-settling patterns became key clues. Once the heart stops, these signs help forensic experts estimate how long someone has been gone. And in this case, the results were haunting. The medical examiner concluded that both Rob and Michelle had died in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. That timing aligned perfectly with what detectives already suspected based on movements and witness accounts. The tragedy unfolded during the quietest stretch of the night, when the neighborhood was asleep and unaware that anything was wrong. That silence wasn't just eerie, it was crucial to understanding how everything happened without interruption. Then the investigation turned to the injuries themselves. Forensic specialists documented multiple sharp force injuries, a technical term for wounds caused by a sharp-edged object. These weren't distant or accidental. They were delivered from close range. This was face-to-face, within arm's reach, direct contact requiring repeated motion. What stunned investigators wasn't only the nature of the injuries, but the number of them. The evidence showed it didn't end quickly. It went on longer than expected, displaying an intensity that shocked even experienced forensic experts. This wasn't a single moment of chaos. It reflected sustained action. From a legal standpoint, repetition matters. Investigators don't speculate emotionally. They interpret evidence. And in this case, the findings pointed strongly toward intent, a decision to continue rather than stop. Following those conclusions, Nick Reiner was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, 1 for each parent. In California, first-degree charges represent the most serious classification reserved for cases believed to involve deliberate action. But prosecutors didn't stop there. They added special circumstances due to multiple victims, a designation that immediately elevated the case to the highest legal tier possible. This wasn't just symbolic. It reshaped everything about how the case would move forward. With special circumstances attached, the potential consequences became the harshest allowed under the law. If convicted, Nick could face life in prison without parole or even the most extreme penalty available, depending on how the court proceeds. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office made it clear this was the strongest charge they could bring. Their statement signaled full confidence in the forensic findings and the legal foundation behind the accusations. At that point, the case officially shifted from tragedy to one of the most intense legal battles the city had seen in years. Investigators now had a locked timeline, a clear sequence, a confirmed cause, and evidence of close, sustained contact. When Nick appeared before a judge for the first time, the weight of it all hit instantly. The rigid courtroom, the silence, even the plain clothes he wore sent shockwaves through everyone present. This wasn't a routine appearance. It was a turning point. On the morning of December 17, 2025, Nick Reiner was escorted into a Los Angeles courtroom for his initial hearing. Until then, the case had lived only through reports and official statements. But now, it had entered the public legal arena. From that moment forward, every word spoken became part of the permanent record. The courtroom was locked down tight. No cameras, no live feed, no broadcast coverage of any kind. Only a small group of reporters, attorneys, and court officials were allowed inside to witness it firsthand. Those restrictions weren't accidental. They were in place before Nick entered and stayed firm throughout the session, underscoring just how serious this case had become. When the doors finally opened and Nick Reiner stepped inside, sheriff's deputies guided him straight to the defense table. The room fell dead silent. Every footstep, every glance, every movement suddenly felt heavy. This wasn't just the start of a legal process. It was the moment the quiet mystery of Brentwood officially turned into a courtroom showdown. Almost instantly, people noticed what Nick was wearing. A harm prevention smock, the kind used in high-risk custody situations. It was visible, unmistakable, and impossible to ignore. Yet, strangely, no one said a word about it. The judge didn't acknowledge it. The attorneys didn't mention it. The hearing continued as if it wasn't even there. That silence spoke louder than any comment could. As the session began, the courtroom locked into complete stillness. The charges were read aloud, in cold, clinical legal language. 2 counts of first-degree homicide, 1 tied to his father and 1 to his mother. No emotion, no explanation, just the weight of the law dropping line by line. When the judge asked if he understood his rights, Nick answered with a short, calm confirmation. That was it, the only time he spoke during the entire hearing. No plea, no questions, no visible reaction to the seriousness of the accusations. He sat motionless, eyes forward, expression flat, like someone sealed off from the moment, focused, contained, unreadable. After the charges were read, the hearing shifted to logistics. Nick's defense attorney requested a delay of the arraignment to allow more time before entering any plea. The judge agreed without hesitation and set a new court date for January 7th, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. No arguments, no fireworks, just procedure moving forward. By the end of the hearing, one thing was clear: this case was only getting started. The tension inside that courtroom said more than any statement ever could. Then another detail hit observers hard. Standing beside Nick was his defense attorney, Alan Jackson. The name alone carried serious weight inside legal circles. Jackson wasn't a routine hire. He was a courtroom heavyweight known for handling high-profile cases under relentless public scrutiny. Over the years, he had represented some of the most controversial figures imaginable, including Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and Karen Reed. That choice sent a clear signal. This wasn't a placeholder defense or a short-term strategy. It was calculated, deliberate, and built for a long fight. It told everyone watching that Nick's legal team was preparing for deep scrutiny, endless filings, and a drawn-out battle where every detail would be challenged line by line. As the hearing wrapped up, Nick was escorted out the same way he came in, silent, guarded, and without a single glance toward the press. No statements were made, not by prosecutors, not by the defense. Inside the courtroom, reporters whispered and scrambled to process what they had just witnessed. Minutes later, the room was nearly empty again. But outside those walls, the real buzz exploded fast. By that afternoon, attention shifted to one burning question that refused to go away. Who was paying for this defense? Legal insiders knew the reality. A case involving 2 first-degree homicide charges with special circumstances could stretch on for years. These cases require expert witnesses, deep forensic reviews, and endless pretrial motions. The costs pile up quickly. Millions can vanish before a trial ever begins. Estimates suggested that mounting a defense of this level could easily exceed $1 million, even before a jury was selected. And here's where the mystery deepened. Nick Reiner had no known active career or income stream that could explain how such a massive legal bill was being covered. That gap sparked immediate speculation. Rumors spread fast across media circles. Some insiders quietly suggested that money connected to the Reiner family estate could be footing the bill, and that possibility added yet another unsettling layer to a case that already refused to slow down. Almost immediately, new questions exploded outside the courtroom. People began asking whether it was even legal to use family-linked funds for a defense like this. Estate law experts weighed in fast, explaining that the issue isn't simple at all. In some cases, shared or inherited assets can be used to cover legal costs. In others, doing so can trigger major disputes, legal challenges, or objections from surviving family members. The rules shift depending on how assets are structured and who technically controls them. Inside the courtroom, though, none of that came up. The judge didn't ask where the money was coming from. The defense didn't volunteer any explanation either. Officially, the issue stayed off the record. Outside, it was a different story. The debate spread fast. Some argued that every person, no matter the accusation, deserves the strongest defense possible. Others were deeply unsettled by the idea that family-connected resources might be used to protect the accused. While the legal process stayed cold and procedural inside, emotions were boiling over everywhere else. Even within the Reiner family, things were reportedly far from settled. Sources claimed that some relatives weren't focused solely on punishment. Instead, they hoped Nick would receive serious mental health treatment alongside the criminal process. To them, the situation wasn't just about charges. It was about years of unresolved issues finally exploding. The case had moved beyond eye on law books and evidence files. It was now tangled up in questions of family responsibility, moral limits, and what justice should really look like. Still, none of those reports were officially confirmed. No filings, no sworn statements, nothing that could be verified. From the prosecution's side, the message never changed. They remained firm that the evidence supported the most serious charges available. They pointed to the severity of what happened and Nick's movements afterward, arguing that both clearly met the legal threshold. Because the case involved more than one victim, the sentencing options were already extremely limited. If convicted, Nick Reiner faced only two outcomes under the law: permanent incarceration, with no chance of release, or the most extreme punishment the system allows. There were no reduced options under these charges. It didn't get more serious than that. Meanwhile, the case kept evolving quietly behind the scenes. Detectives continued reviewing details. Attorneys refined strategies and information not yet public circulated among those closest to the investigation. Everyone involved knew the next phase would be even heavier. The courtroom may have looked calm, but beneath that surface, pressure was building fast, and it soon became clear that Nick Reiner wouldn't remain silent forever. In the days that followed, attention shifted to something he had said long before the case reached court. Words that suddenly carried new weight, statements that would reshape how many people viewed the entire story. Nick had once spoken openly about his childhood, admitting he never felt truly close to his father, Rob Reiner. He described an emotional distance that shaped how he saw himself inside the family. He said he often felt like an outsider in his own home, watching others connect, laugh, and share moments, while he stood on the edge, unsure how to fit in. By all accounts, Rob was a devoted and present father, successful, involved, and deeply committed to his family. He shared strong bonds with his other children through routines, interests, and shared experiences. But for Nick, those same spaces never quite clicked. The home looked stable from the outside, but internally he felt disconnected. It wasn't that Rob ignored him. If anything, he tried to provide everything he could. But long work hours and success can create emotional gaps without intention. Nick grew up surrounded by care, but he later admitted that care didn't always reach him. That quiet isolation followed him as he got older. Instead of feeling grounded at home, he began searching for belonging elsewhere, drawn to environments that promised escape rather than structure. That's when substance use entered his life. What started small quickly spiraled. By his mid-teens, his struggles were already severe enough to require professional treatment. His family didn't hide it or deny it. They sought help repeatedly, trying to pull him back from something that was tightening its grip. Nick later admitted the substances were powerful and destructive, locking him into a cycle that became harder to escape with time. Moments of progress gave his family hope. Then setbacks followed, breaking it again and again, and those long, unresolved struggles would soon be viewed through an entirely different lens. Every time it seemed like Nick was finally finding his footing, the fall came even harder. His life slipped back into instability. Again and again he drifted across states, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, often without a steady place, to land or any real structure. These were not career moves or fresh starts. They were survival stretches filled with uncertainty and chaos. Through all of it, Rob and Michelle Reiner never walked away. They stayed present, stayed involved, and refused to give up on their son. Over the years, they spoke openly about his struggles, never blaming outsiders, never hiding the truth, and never dodging their own responsibility. They poured in everything they had: time, patience, love, and resources, multiple treatment programs, constant support, calls, check-ins, and second chances every time he stumbled. At one point, Rob tried a different approach. He brought Nick into his world of filmmaking. In 2015, they worked together on Being Charlie, a project drawn directly from Nick's personal struggles. For a moment, things looked different. Nick had structure, purpose, direction. People close to the family said he seemed steadier, more focused, like he finally had something holding him in place. But that stability did not last. The old patterns returned: distance, unpredictability, and collapse. Each setback hit harder than the last, draining not only Nick, but everyone around him. Over time, concern turned into fear. What once felt manageable no longer did. According to those close to the family, the worry wasn't just about recovery anymore. It was about safety. That emotional distance Nick once described from childhood never fully healed. Love mixed with guilt, hope mixed with disappointment, years of effort that never quite connected. By the time of that Christmas party, the tension was not new. It was years in the making. That argument was not random. It was a breaking point. In the days that followed, the family spoke through a joint message from Romy and Jake Reiner. Their words were not about legal battles or speculation. They spoke only of grief, shock, and love. They asked for privacy. And since then, they have remained silent. No interviews, no public appearances. A private memorial followed. No cameras, no spectacle, just remembrance, connection, and quiet reflection. Across Hollywood, tributes poured in, not just for Rob's work, but for who he was as a person. A steady presence, a trusted leader, someone who made others feel safe to create. And now the question turns to you. What do you think really happened? Do you believe Nick Reiner is responsible, or is there more to this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this breakdown valuable, like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into major Hollywood cases.